Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there. Good to be back here in the studio. This is a special bonus episode about the barrel murders and what's his name? Tommaso, the ox, Peto, and a lot of those guys, Joe Petrosino. It's kind of a shorty. And also, I'm putting this out because I'm asking for your help. I have a book that I've been working on. I'm about little over halfway through. It's going to be a memoir about my career and mainly about my interactions with the mob during the Civella-Spero War and what we did during that time. So I'm doing it, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit different sort of a style. It's a real short and punchy and to the point style. I'm really trying to take all the words I can out of it. I need some feedback. I want to see, I got 20,000 words and I don't know how many hours into this thing. And hell, I don't know if it's any good or not. And it may not be. It may be stupid for all I know. I think you'll find it somewhat entertaining. And so what I'm looking for is some real critical feedback, something that you like, something that you didn't like. You're not going to hurt my feelings. Promise me that. I mean, you see something you don't like, or you think I'm redundant, or you see some errors where I repeat myself in it or something, let me know. It's about halfway through. I got up to the point where Carl Sparrow has been shot. He's coming out of the hospital and he has to go to dialysis and has to get his car fitted with hand controls. And so from there on, the war between the Savellas and Sparrow is really on. Give me a feedback. What you have to do, I think, is email me at ganglandwire@gmail.com. Let me know and I'll send you a PDF and then you can get back with me. Thanks a lot, guys. Now listen to my story about the Mustache Pete's and the early counterfeiting game. Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there, back here in the studio all alone today, I've got a quick little story of early New York mafia, the Mustache Pete. When these guys got here, they're looking for money, they're looking for opportunity. They're denied a lot of opportunity, but they brought the mafia with them. They brought this criminal mentality with them. They started sending out black hand notes and preying on fellow immigrants from Sicily and Italy and kind of branched out from that. It preyed on a lot of people. Now, one thing they got into early on was counterfeiting, and the law enforcement agency that had the responsibility to investigate counterfeiting back then was the Secret Service, and it still is today. The Secret Service was really the only nationwide law enforcement agency on a federal level back in those days. 1901, there's a brand new counterfeit $5 bill detected. Different banks across the country printed the banknotes back then. This was the National Iron Bank of Morristown, New Jersey. I read it was part of a production run of $250,000. Now, $250,000 in 1901 was a lot of money. Of course, they had to sell it for, maybe 25 cents on the dollar, probably even less. So Secret Service agents quickly arrested Giuseppe DiPrimo and a couple other guys for passing some of these counterfeit notes in Yonkers, New York in 1902. Weeks later, they arrested Vito LaDuca and a couple other associates down in Pittsburgh, and they had tracked them from New York to San Francisco and other cities across the United States. So they're like onto this counterfeit ring, and they were a nationwide counterfeit ring. One of these guys, Vito Catone, was a bad character. He tried to escape arrest by lunging at the agents with a knife and then ran away into nearby rail yard. Chased him down by commandeering a train, and then knocked him down by hurling bricks at him. Now, can you imagine that? They got a guy with a knife. You're chasing him through the rail yards. You jump on a moving train, jump off, throw bricks at him, and knock him down. Actually, they might not even had guns. Law enforcement, again, didn't carry guns as much like they do today. He was such a bad character. When he got to a hospital, he tried to kill a nurse and escape with some kind of a kitchen knife he'd picked up. They found out that the Morristown counterfeits were being distributed at the direction of mafia leader Ignazio Lupo and Giuseppe Morello. Now, these were the two big-time mob bosses in the Northeast in New York City, particularly back in. Lupo was Lupo the Wolf. Giuseppe Morello was like the godfather. After his arrest for counterfeiting, Giuseppe DiPrimo and his two partners were locked up in New York City's Ludlow Street jail. Ignazio Lupo visited them and arranged payment of their attorney. And when they were standing trial, Lupo would go to the trial each day and then take news of how the case was progressing back to Giuseppe Morello. They were found guilty, passing these counterfeits 1903. That weekend, they say Lupo, Morello, and everybody else in the gang were observed holding the meeting in the rear of their Prince Street saloon headquarters. Now, the Secret Service is still working on these guys, and they planned a sting operation against this group. They got an informant with some marked bills that were going to purchase the counterfeits from the gang. They put together 11 search warrants for the homes and businesses of these men, but the plan kind of stalled out. They were watching them pretty close, and an unfamiliar face showed up. And Giuseppe Morello and another guy were seen talking earnestly between themselves before taking the stranger to the back of a butcher shop in Manhattan. 5:30 the next morning, a Ms. Frances O'Connor was making her way to work, and she saw a suspicious barrel at East 11th Street. Looking inside, she was horrified, I say, to find a corpse. Not only was it a corpse, it would have been almost decapitated by a knife slashing across the throat. The Secret Service got called to this scene by the police. They figured out this was a stranger they had seen in Morello's company the previous night. So they quickly arrested Morello and got Ignazio Lupo because they were like the leaders of this gang. They took in a bunch of correspondence as evidence. You know, it's funny back then, you wrote letters. These guys were writing letters to each other talking about their counterfeit business. They made more than a dozen arrests. There were a few of them that got away. They didn't exactly know who this man was in the barrel, but 5 days after the murder, they got an anonymous letter and said that the man found in the barrel came from Buffalo. And the dead man, in the letter, it claimed that the dead man had arrived in New York to help get money for Giuseppe Di Primo, who was in jail for counterfeiting for Giuseppe Morello, and Morello was there at the meeting. Figure, they must have killed the guy, and they had a bunch of them in jail. Joe Petrosino, who was a famous Italian detective, went up to Sing Sing and visited Di Primo and brought a picture of the victim, and he said, "That's my brother-in-law, Benedetto Madonna." Next day, Joe Petrosino went on to Buffalo, New York, where Madonna was from, interviewed his wife, and she said that her husband had been a member of a secret society and had traveled to New York to assist her brother, Di Primo. They charged him, put Morello on the stand. He was really nervous when he was confronted with a letter that Madonna had sent him from Pittsburgh. And it showed that Morello had told Madonna to come to Pittsburgh and help secure the release of a couple of the imprisoned gang members. And they found a letter from Madonna to Morello, and Madonna had claimed that Morello had sent him over to Pittsburgh to try to help some of the gang members get out of jail down in Pittsburgh, but yet he couldn't get it done. Madonna continued in his letter and criticizing Morello, accusing him of being unwilling to spend any money to help his men, and referred to the fact that his brother-in-law, Giuseppe Di Primo, was still in prison for running the counterfeit money for him. Well, several of this gang, Morello and Lupo and their whole little crew were in jail. There were anonymous letters sent out to all the Italians all the Italian communities in the United States. They were demanding donations to help build a legal defense funds for all these guys. They didn't get much out of Newark, and they said down in Newark the nervous Italians were buying up all the secondhand guns they could because they figured that the mob, they figured the Black Handers were going to come after them. Even their political contacts had an Irish politician at the time named Tim Sullivan, and he said, well, Madonna brought it on himself. He caused himself to be killed because he was involved with these criminals. All these suspects, in the end, they had a coroner's inquest, and all these suspects were cleared, and they said he was murdered by some person unknown. And in particular, a guy named Tommaso Peto, who really is the one that did this murder, was discharged. The coroner's physician said, "I've never heard of a more disgraceful proceeding in my life than to let this man escape punishment. The man who recommended the discharge of Peto the Bull ought to be removed from office immediately." Well, that's just the beginning of this. 2 years later, 1905, someone murders Peto the Bull, and Giuseppe Di Primo had been released from prison just 2 weeks earlier. So it turns out, as they start investigating into this later on, they find out that the dead man, Madania, had sent money to New York to Morello, $1,000 for his brother-in-law's defense, and Morello just pocketed the money and did nothing for him. Another piece of evidence that indicated Peto the Ox had killed Madania was that they found a pawn ticket in his pocket, and it was for a watch that was Madania's watch. He had gotten Madania's watch after he killed him and pawned it. So they really had a lot of evidence on these guys, and they just got released. But Giuseppe Di Primo, he's gonna get justice. He'll kill, Peto the Ox right after he gets out of jail, and from then on, one by one, every one of these guys gets killed. Won't go on to name them. Every one of these guys, including Ignazio Lupo, everybody but Joseph Morello will be killed over the next few years. That's a little story of some of the earliest mob murders reported in the United States. This was when we had black-handers, no real solid organization, just the basis of the organization that came over from Sicily, and a few strong men put things together. And again, you see these organizations, they have to be based around something. Later on, they'll refine it when they go nationwide, and they base it around prohibition and bootlegging alcohol. But back then, they based it around this crime of counterfeiting. Counterfeiting was pretty easy crime to get away with back then. It requires organization. It requires a boss. It requires lieutenants. It requires what they called people that passed what they called queer money out there. They had a name for that, and all of a sudden I can't remember what it was. It required the lowest level, what we would call associates today, and these were called queer pushers at the time. Now, that has nothing to do with being a homosexual. They called the counterfeit money queer, and if you went out and pushed it out, then you were a queer pusher. So it took a lot of those people to then, well, once somebody had the money, then you got to go out to the different stores and pass the money and buy something, then bring the change back, or somehow get it in, get good money in exchange for this bad money. So thanks a lot, guys. Don't forget, like to ride motorcycles. Watch out for motorcycles when you're out there on the street. You have a problem with PTSD, and you've been in service, go to the VA website. Drugs or alcohol, go see Angelo Ruggiano. Gambling, you got 1-800-BETS-OFF in Missouri. Every state's got a different kind of organization. The casinos have to pay so much. Part of their licensing fee is they have to pay money into efforts to help addicted gamblers. Don't forget, I got things for sale out there. I got a couple of books, got 3 books out there. Just Google Gary Jenkins, Amazon, Mafia. You'll find, my movies are out there to stream for $1.99 each. And, got to support the podcast, guys. That's an easy way to do it. Thanks a lot.